Major funding for this program has been provided by the Letty Pate Evans Foundation and by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Georgia Humanities Council. Additional funding was provided by the David, Helen, and Marion Woodward Fund, a Wachovia Bank-managed foundation, by Atlanta Gaslight Company, Georgia's largest energy distributor and Atlanta's oldest corporate citizen, and by the American Express Philanthropic Fund.
This is some of the last undeveloped country in DeKalb County. Right over the hill behind us is Arabian Mountain Park, a county-owned wilderness preservation area. Oh yeah, the fellow on the porch up there is the producer of this series. He seems to think that this log cabin helps him maintain his ties with his Appalachian roots. Sort of a 60s throwback, I guess, a back to nature sort.
Like many thousands of Atlantans and millions of other Americans, he makes the half-hour-plus daily commute to the city to do what it takes to make his mortgage note. In the 1990s, even log cabins come with adjustable rate mortgages. 10 driving miles outside of the perimeter, this place is beyond suburbia. It's what we now call exurbia. And the development of suburbs and exurbs raised many thorny issues for the making of modern Atlanta.
In today's Atlanta, the automobile and the suburb feed on each other. The Tom Moreland Interchange, more popularly known as Spaghetti Junction, exchanges traffic at the intersection of Interstates 85 and 285 on the northern rim of the metropolis. I-285, the perimeter highway encircling the city, serves as a crossroads, the archetypal main street for today's urban America.
Because it's a mess out there, fresh air already today, Randy. Here we go in the city. Connector northbound at 10th Street. That wreck has traffic slow back to I-20 right now. And a wreck connector southbound at North Avenue's got traffic slow back to the Brookwood split. Southbound 285 at the Lakewood Freeway, also a mishap there. Another accident southbound 285 at Cascade Road. Ashby at Marietta Street, a wreck with injuries. Highway 29 at Scott Boulevard. West Nancy Creek at Ashford Dunwoody. That's with injuries in DeKalb County. And westbound I-20 before Thornton Road, two separate wrecks out there in West Cobb as traffic slow back to the Six Flags area. Southbound 400 before 285, a jackknife tractor trailer, that's in the center lane with injuries. Also add to that Franklin Road and Delk Road in Marietta. This report is brought to you by Maury.
Unlike earlier main streets where trolleys and cars pass by pedestrians walking along sidewalks, the expressway is for automotive traffic only. It's a between place, somewhere between where you've been and where you're going. It's not a people place. In fact, the only time you're likely to encounter anyone out here is in one of those all too frequent traffic mishaps which bring this mass of frustrated humanity to a screeching halt, usually during rush hour.
While dinner's not playing in traffic, let's consider how the automobile, the way of life in America, has hastened the process of suburbanization. Suburbs rode into Atlanta first on the horse-drawn trolley and later on the horseless carriage. Druid Hills, where we are right now, was among the first. It was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted in the 1890s, and it influenced the shape of many suburbs that followed. By 1930, some 36 planned suburbs with such picturesque names as Ansley Park, Garden Hills, and Spring Lake were in place mostly east and north of the downtown. Such development set the scene for changes in the city predicted by Olmsted disciple Warren Manning in a 1922 article he wrote for the Sunday Constitution magazine.
Atlanta now begins to seriously feel the pangs of overcrowding and to realize that something needs to be done. The solution requires the appreciation of and the need of adequate access to the landscape beauty of the region that the automobile now makes readily accessible to the city for homes and for vacation periods. Atlanta, tomorrow a city of a million, will by the year 2000 extend more than 15 miles out, far enough out on the spokes of transportation ways to permit radial roads to again pass off from secondary centers into the country. They will lead to industries and homes on the city's south side and to magnificent estates on the north. a Piedmont picturesque.
The end of World War II brought our boys home as heroes, with love on their minds, money in their pockets, and the American dream on easy payments. Mass production techniques in the housing industry created endless chains of new neighborhoods, stretching away from central cities, easily accessible by car. The picturesque suburbs of post-war Atlanta, like much of America, concealed a far less attractive aspect of life: racial segregation. At the turn of the century, social critic W.E.B. Du Bois had predicted, "The problem of the 20th century is the problem of the color line, the relation of the darker to the lighter races of men." In Atlanta, the color line existed as a physical entity. It contained African Americans within older sections of the city, while it opened the new suburbs to whites only. Atlanta's black leadership recognized the need to break out of the older communities and open up at least a portion of the new suburbs for an expanding black population. After hard bargaining and organized voting drives during the early 1920s, the color line was finally broken here on Ashby Street on the city's west side. Black suburbanization had begun. A quiet revolution was underway.
Going back as far as 70 years ago, there's been a progression westward of black neighborhoods in the city. First, I guess one of the barriers for black migration westward was Ashby Street, which borders on the West End neighborhood just adjacent to this campus. Beyond there was a steady progression out along Hunter Street, which is now Martin Luther King Drive. And then we come to the 60s, of course, with the famous Peyton Road actual barriers that were erected, which were to be the ending point for black migration westward. Of course, those barriers came down and the migration continued and continued on really now even into Fulton County and into other counties on the southwestern side of the city.
Move Six Flags to underground and put Smyrna out of bounds.
But please, don't monkey with Beach Street. Stretch 400 if you will.
And let Lomax foot the bill.
But please, don't monkey with Beach Street.
In 1922, landscape architect Warren Manning might have seemed visionary in predicting that suburban Atlanta would extend a whole 15 miles up Peachtree from 5 Points. If he could return in 1992, he'd find it extending 30 miles northeast to Peachtree Corners and 40 miles south to Peachtree City. He may have underestimated the distance, but his basic premise was right. The automobile would drastically expand the city and reshape its environment. By the late 1930s, the first two shopping centers with off-street parking had been built. Road Center North on Peachtree Street and Briarcliff Plaza here on Ponce de Leon at North Highland. This shopping center is best known for its all-night pharmacy, which, incidentally, has given us perhaps the most endearing piece of pop art in the history of modern television advertising.
Plaza Pharmacy, Ponce de Leon and Highland, is never closed. The Plaza's prescription department is staffed with 5 registered pharmacists who insist on careful checking of each prescription. The Plaza's cosmetic department is one of the largest in town. Complete meals and fountain delights are served 24 hours a day. You'll find not only candies, Hallmark cards, magazines, and books to choose from. Plaza Pharmacy, Ponce de Leon and Highland, is never closed. Open day and night, including all holidays.
But I digress. 20 years later, and almost 8 miles due north of downtown, the region's bellwether mall, Lenox Square, opened. Within a decade, the ever-expanding Lenox and nearby upscale Phipps Plaza would promote themselves as the new downtown. But the developers of Lenox Square and Phipps Plaza found their claim to be the new downtown a hollow one in just a few short years. Why? Because the Eisenhower administration came up with the idea of moving military convoys around the country faster on superhighways in the event of war. And the Hartsfield administration seized upon this as a way of holding Atlanta together.
After World War II, there had been only a modest amount of development in this region for a long, long period, stretching almost to 20 years. And all of a sudden in the 50s, we burst out with a period of prosperity and of construction, of investments of all sorts. And the birth rate rose to its highest level in history. It coincided with a decision that was made in 1954 for the national government to begin to undertake a national highway program.
When the Federal Highway Defense Act of 1954 freed funds from Washington for interstate expressways, Mayor Hartsfield was ready with a plan that had been devised just after World War II. As head of the Central Atlanta Improvement Association in the 1950s, George Goodwin was a key advisor.
Yes, the Hartsfield was always looking out for the town, and he was on top of anything that was going on. Remember back with his idea of the night airport airway landing system. And so really before the war was over, he and some of the other people in Atlanta were thinking about how we're going to move people and goods around this place after the war.
The expressway system in Atlanta joined 3 cross-country interstates downtown. I-75, the north-south highway, joined I-85, the northeast-southwest route, several miles through the city, becoming known as the Downtown Connector. I-20, an east-west interstate, crossed the connector just south of the state capitol. I-285, a perimeter highway completely encircling the city, was added later.
The highways opened up undeveloped land of enormous, to enormous extent to allow the flow of this demand to move outward. And that was buttressed and supported by the federal growth policies that chose not to put the national funds into the rebuilding of the school systems and the park systems and the pipes and the streets and so forth, but to finance the great demand for new development out of the suburbs. Instead of the highway function as advertised, and that is bringing people to the central city, it has had and will have the opposite effect of pulling people to the suburbs and draining the vitality of the central city and its neighborhoods.
An expressway system intended to speed suburbanites into the central city, let them escape from it into a world of their own. Over a generation, countless shopping malls, office parks, industrial parks, and subdivisions grew along the rim and spokes of the freeway system, expanding the metropolitan limits toward the borders of neighboring states. Now there are several new downtowns on the north side, where lies our ultimate suburb, Dunwoody.
Hello there. I am Mrs. Ashford Dunwoody. Of the Peachtree Dunwoodies. No relation to the Chambly Dunwoodies. Although Ashford and Chambly did go to Boys High together. I am here tonight to talk to you about raising your child. Now, parents, there are several things to get your child on the road to good grace. First is culture. An appreciation of the arts is most important. I recall a rather unfortunate incident that happened on one of our Junior League Museums tours to see the King Tut exhibit. Well, a group of 6-year-olds completely devoured the entire preserved food section. It wasn't so much the fact that they ate it, it was how they ate it. Parents, if your child shows an appetite for art, make sure he chews it with his mouth closed. Second in importance is religion. Picking out the right church for your child is very important. Make sure they have a heated indoor swimming pool and a good summer camp program.
I'm aware of the tennis jokes and all that.
What, any of those come to mind, you know?
The one about how a Dunwoody housewife goes to a funeral in a black tennis outfit. I really don't like those jokes. I really think people have a misconception of this area.
I think maybe there's a reputation about Dunwoody that we're just simply a tennis playing community, but that's not true.
I am a tennis player, but I don't really play. I don't like that sort of competitive tennis all the time and women sitting around. I didn't like that. I'd done that. I did that in New Hampshire when the tennis boom was on. I really wasn't part of that. But there's a lot more to life here than that. A lot more.
Dunwoody, we like the look of the Williamsburg look here in the middle of Dunwoody Village. But I guess since I'm a child of the 70s, it really bothers me that everything would have to be exactly the same. When Turtles built a new building, they had a purple awning on it, and some of the Dunwoody people are fighting it. And I just think there's so many more important things to fight about than a purple awning to wreck the Williamsburg look. I just say relax about it. So, and, but I love Dunwoody because I feel really safe.
I guess you're saying the Dunwoody housewife plays tennis, has lunch with a couple of ladies, but most black females on the north side of town travel, take their children to daycare centers, take their children to other daycare situations. We're out hustling, we're out working very hard. And I kind of think that Dunwoody housewife is a vanishing breed at this point too, because most households need a second income.
Suburban women, especially suburban housewives, are really people. That they come in all sizes and shapes and colors, and their aspirations are different, and their prejudices are different, and their experiences are different, and their occupations are different, and so forth. So there's really no way to classify suburban women as one kind of anything, because they're not. They're too varied and they're too different.
Do you ever go much to Atlanta, to downtown?
Yes, we go downtown some.
What do you do?
Not entertainment things, when we go to the symphony, or when we go to the ballet, or when we go to the theater or something like that, we go downtown.
We go occasionally, but generally we don't go too much because we're kind of afraid of the crime down there.
In retrospect, I would have lived closer into town.
Really?
Into the city, yes.
Why?
Because I like to go to the symphony and I like to go to the theatre, and I just like the atmosphere in close-in neighborhoods.
Some people here say, oh, have you been to Underground? You took MARTA? Well, how'd you feel about that? And those are Dunwoodians talking, but I don't know. I think you're going to have that kind of reaction anywhere you go.
Well, I think that people think everyone that lives in Dunwoody is extremely affluent and drives a Mercedes, but there's a big cross-section of people that live out here, not just wealthy, but from all areas of life, and I think people have the wrong idea.
A good maid is invaluable, and she can help you pick your child out in a crowd.
And this isn't my kid either, but that's okay.
As its people moved ever outward, the city adopted another new slogan. Atlanta, the city too busy to hate, was now Atlanta, a city without limits. In the process, it also devised a new set of references, inside or outside the perimeter. This convenient classification provided a ready measure for physical distance, accessibility, lifestyle, class, and race. It defined the boundaries and challenges of today's and tomorrow's Atlanta. Outside the perimeter, specifically beyond its northern rim, there developed a new community form and lifestyle that we described many miles ago as exurban. In contrast to older, closer-in, more traditional suburbs, which were extensions of the city proper, the new exurbs exist within themselves alone. This mall is Gwinnett Place, but it could be any place. It could be in Los Angeles or in Toledo. It could even be in Disney World. There's nothing about it that bespeaks Atlanta. The Rich's department store in this mall isn't like the historic Rich's downtown that finally withered and died. Here, there's no Magnolia Room, no Pink Pig, no Christmas tree, no tradition of family ownership stretching back to the 1870s. The average shopper here doesn't relate to any of this. Often a corporate transferee simply exchanges his family's exurban community outside of Detroit, Kansas City, or Philadelphia for its mirror image in Dunwoody or Norcross. In career terms, up and out. For many such transient households, community is more a generic term than a vital place.
Inside the perimeter is becoming the exact opposite of outside. Outside are some of the nation's fastest growing counties, Gwinnett and Cobb among them. Inside are large pockets of stagnation and decay, set against an area of affluence. Outside, the population is 3/4 white. Inside, it's 2/3 black. Outside is now a Republican donut, which has sent to Washington 2 stridently conservative congressmen, Newt Gingrich and the discredited Pat Swindle. Inside, Democrats now elect such heroes of the civil rights era as John Lewis and Andrew Young.
Yesterday's suburbs, West End, Washington Park, and Druid Hills, for example, are now historic districts fairly close to the downtown area. We now have exurbs extending out to 30 miles from the downtown area, and each of these areas has their own suburban centers or suburban downtown areas. In place of the old fried egg analogy with a single center, we now have a pepperoni pizza model with many centers spreading around the metropolitan area. For example, out to the northwest, we have the Cumberland Galleria area. To the north, the Perimeter Center area out along Georgia 400. To the northeast, we have the North Lake area, and Gwinnett Place is another burgeoning center. For the future, I suspect that this process will continue and will add even more centers to the 8 to 10 that we now have. For example, the outer perimeter highway that's being proposed will develop its own suburban downtown areas. So in the future, we may be talking about downtown Lake Lanier out in the suburbs.
The kind of development that would be drawn to the outer perimeter is not that which competes with the kind of development that's coming into Atlanta.
I think it ought to be built. I proposed it, I re-proposed it. It was first proposed many years ago, and it's more than a highway. It's had 3 main purposes. One, it's needed as a transportation artery. Second, I think it's needed to support at a comfortable lifestyle the growth that's just coming on top of it. And third, it would continue to generate economic development for the entire state.
The outer loop is the most ridiculous thing ever proposed on the state of Georgia. And I hope it, before we spend any money on it, we come to some form of sanity and stop it. The outer loop is ridiculous.
Because it will have this effect of drawing.
Well, no, it's not only that, but it's like in any circle. I draw a circle here, which say the inner loop. But then I go out and I draw a bigger circle out here, and it's a geometric progression. And the expense of that and the fragmentation and dispersal of the energies and the critical mass that makes for something great and efficient begins to disperse and becomes totally inefficient. Enormous waste of capital. And I hope to God it never comes to pass.
Some of the images evoked by suburban exurban sprawl are disturbing. The contrast between north side affluence and south side neglect. Localism in government in place of cooperation in regional concerns. Governmental deadlock, traffic gridlock, polluted air, water, and soil. A city without limits, perhaps, but also a city without focus.
Consider our producer's cozy cabin on 2 acres of land here in southeast DeKalb, and consider what lies 2 miles from him in any direction. To the south, other modest homes owned by mostly white country people on a semi-rural road. To the north, the town of Lithonia, a little piece of pepperoni in Truman Hartshorn's metaphorical pizza. To the west, brand new mansions on estate lots inhabited by upwardly mobile African Americans. But to the east, a moonscape, where construction of yet another giant regional mall has been stalled for years because of poor planning.
Can the outback be tamed, or does it have a momentum all its own? We're urged to think and plan regionally, but some skeptics define a region as an area one size larger than the one we can't quite manage now. The challenge is the region, not the city, not the suburbs. Right now, in the race between regional planning and development like this, the odds are with this.
Major funding for this program has been provided by the Letty Pate Evans Foundation and by the National Endowment for the Humanities and the Georgia Humanities Council. Additional funding was provided by the David, Helen, and Marion Woodward Fund, a Wachovia Bank managed foundation, by Atlanta Gaslight Company, Georgia's largest energy distributor and Atlanta's oldest corporate citizen, and by the American Express Philanthropic Fund,